So 2 years ago, I was working on a project, and the builder really wanted to get it done before I had time off scheduled for when my son was born. And so at the time, it was like trying to decide how much I'd be able to get done, if I'd be able to get past a certain point before holding up the rest of the project. The way things worked out, I ended up getting everything done. And as a result, the builder came up to me, who was like a classic, kind of that mobster type of Italian guy, and takes out this fat wad out of his pocket, peels off some cash, gives it to me, and it's like, hey, get something nice for your son from Uncle Mickey. So when an Italian guy who reminds you of a mobster tells you to buy something for a kid, it is important that you use it for the kid and not put it towards something responsible like bills. So I ended up with the SEGA Homestar Flux, which was like the top of the line planetarium that I could find for my son, because I'm a huge science fiction nerd, and I figured, hey, why not space for a son's room? So anyways, I would never have spent what I spent on this thing, so that was kind of a splurge. Now, there are cheaper versions that kind of look terrible, but this one, I will say, the discs that come with it, in a kid's mind, it could very easily become space, like sleeping outside. It's that good. But at the end of the day, all it is really just a glorified projector. I think currently, as the time of recording, they run about $260. Now, I don't remember spending that on it, though. I want to say when I bought it, it was about $180, and I remember at that time it being ridiculous. So that's what I spent Uncle Mickey's cash on. Of course, since then, now I have a daughter who is going to need a very cool nightlight as well, and so I cannot bring myself to spend another $260 on a different nightlight. And now my son really looks forward to his stars when he goes to bed, so I ended up with the Galaxy Projector, which is substantially cheaper. I want to say, I think I spent about $35 on the one that I currently have. So right out of the gate, with the two, as far as build quality, probably the Sega is built a little bit better. That being said, it also has a disc inside of it, so it's not something you're gonna want to let a little kid grab. You want to keep it up on a shelf. My son has already grabbed it and shook it up, and the disc got jammed in there a little bit, so a little bit concerned of the inner workings, but it's a solid little device. Whereas the Galaxy Projector doesn't feel like it's built as well, but there's no disc inside of it to get rattled around if a kid grabs it. Not to mention, it is substantially cheaper than the Star Projector. So the Sega the one that I came with two discs. It came with one with the Milky Way with star constellations, and it came with one with just the Milky Way on it. And you can get extra discs, which means it's kind of expandable, I guess you'd say. So you can get the Earth rotating around, which I have. Also, my favorite happens to be the disappearing continent. There are different settings. You can have a shooting star, you can have the slow rotation that goes along with it. There's also a little bit faster rotation, gives it kind of a nice touch, but ultimately it's just a very stationary projection of whatever disc you happen to get. But you can switch it up, so it can be completely different looks. I think there's one that's telescopes. I think another one is the Northern Lights. There's various ones. They're all about $25. I have heard that there are ones that are either made by a third party or just bad knockoffs, and so that they don't quite fit quite right inside of the device itself. Now the Galaxy Projector, I think mine's damaged. I think it came damaged. The stars that it projects, first of all, mine has stars that it projects through like streaks. So I think there's something wrong with the inside workings. Also, the stars when it projects, they're like very evenly placed dots. So they do not look like stars. And as far as the water, it feels very much so like it's a water being projected. Also, with the Galaxy Projector. It's kind of like a half moon thing on it that rotates into like this piece of plastic which shoots it all over the room, including the walls. So depending on your room size, it'll fill up the room from like waist up with like a wave pattern that goes on the walls. Also, you can dim the light on it, so the night light can be really dark, it can be really bright. Really bright, I think it's like kind of overpowering if it's all the way turned up. Whereas the Flux is one brightness no matter what. And I think the original one with the star projector is, I think, a little bit dimmer, but I think the Flux brightness is actually just perfect. But when the Flux is projecting, it's just projecting on the ceiling, and depending on the size of your ceiling, height of your ceiling, that's going to determine the size. Ours is sitting on the changing table, out of reach of my son who's 2. So it kind of projects at an angle. So that kind of gives it another little depth, I guess, as the planets and stuff go around. They kind of shoot out farther when it gets farther away from the projector itself. But there's the lens on the projector is such that it still fills the ceiling, and it's an 8-foot ceiling with it up about 3 feet in the room. Image quality is a little bit distorted when it gets to the end of that, but you can play with the focus to have it kind of in the middle, so as the projection goes around, it gets a little bit dimmer, but for a 2-year-old kid, I don't think it's going to matter so much. Definitely a better option than using those stickers, those stars, those glow-in-the-dark star stickers. For one thing, it's a lot easier for us. Our son, sometimes when the timer turns off, he's not quite asleep. We have to go back in there and turn the timer back on. If you have glow-in-the-dark stuff, that's obviously not going to work. The Galaxy Projector, I should start calling it waves, because that to me what it looks like. It feels like an underwater simulation, not like space simulation. Both of them have sleep timers on them, which I would say is essential. But the sleep timer on the underwater one, I think, is the different times. I want to say the shortest is a half an hour, where on the star projector it's, I think, 15 minutes, which is usually what we end up doing. By 15 minutes my son's usually out. So if you ask me which one is better, if money is not an option, obviously for me I'm going to take the space one with a fistful of discs, different discs to swap out just to change things up a little bit. That being said, we're talking $260 versus $35. So I don't think the space one is 7.5 times better than the underwater one. Now, it's obviously not space. Underwater is still cool too. My son just so happens to be hooked on space because that's his nightlight. And when we changed rooms, I tried changing the nightlight too, but he definitely picked up on that and he wanted his stars back. But for us, I didn't want to have a $260 nightlight for him to get up out of his bed in the middle of the night while we're trying to sleep and start playing with it. So did some digging, found this one, ordered it, and it appears to work good. The sleep timer works. I will say that the remote that comes with it is kind of a piece of crap, and I can tell you that's going to be the first thing to get lost. The stars have all the buttons really easily on the back of it, so when I turn it on, I can do that in the dark and push all the buttons once, and it puts everything in the exactly right settings for 15 minutes with the rotation and the shooting star. The other one has buttons, but they're a little bit more complicated. In the dark, it's kind of tough to tell. The remote, it's easy to figure out, but again, like I said, this is going to be in a kid's room. The remote is going to be the first thing that gets lost. Then you're dealing with batteries that you have to, just a pain. But again, $35 versus $260. As far as longevity goes, the underwater one has not been tested for very long. My daughter is not quite to the point of having her own room and having the projector for the nightlight. My son has been using his stars for about 2 years, and they've held up. It works just as good as the day that we got it. so long as they don't get a hold of the discs and scratch the discs. Let me know in the comments below if you have any ones that you would recommend. These are the two that I got. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you next time.